Dear Claire, love, I have only a matter of hours left of my life. I only wish I could see you and the kids one last time. I wish you all the best with our new baby. I'll never know if I ever had a daughter or not. Tears are streaming down my face.
Informants in general is a dirty, unsavory game, and we don't like it. We're obliged to enter into it because of the threat we face, and will continue to do so.
Anyone living in West Belfast knows that the consequence for informing is death.
Pray for me. Look after my grave and visit when you can. Tell the kids I will always love them and cherish them. Your loving husband, John.
This letter was written earlier this year by a man who knew he was about to be shot by the IRA. In the last 20 years, more than 40 people who the IRA claimed were informers for British intelligence have been executed by their self-styled courts.
The bodies of 2 of the 3 men murdered by the IRA as alleged informers have been recovered from the isolated South Armagh roadsides where they were dumped naked and hooded by their killers last night. The operation to recover the 3rd body is still underway.
And I reckoned I would be shot by the time I got maybe to about 25.
Spying on the IRA is a kind of Russian roulette. Usually the only glimpse we get of an informer's precarious life is when his luck runs out. Now, for the first time in the Northern Ireland conflict, an undercover agent who survived tells his remarkable story from the safety of another country. His information saved many lives. We have disguised his appearance, and we shall call him Michael.
The IRA have got a very, very good security team. And, in my opinion, if they suspect you and they get you, you're dead.
In Republican areas of Belfast, the word informer is synonymous with the cause betrayed. Here, the informer is branded as a common tout. But to the security forces, the informer is their most effective weapon. All the eyes and ears of the 30,000 soldiers and policemen in Northern Ireland can never match a source on the inside forewarning where the IRA will strike next. Most informers are recruited by the RUC Special Branch. Michael was only 17, but already known to the police as a seasoned criminal when they made their first approach.
I was approached by a uniformed RUC man. He was on the beat, walking around the area, and he just stopped me. And he used to stop me all the time for weeks and weeks and weeks. And one day, I was walking along a street, and he made it his business to cut across the road to stop me. And he stopped me, and the first thing he says was, "How you keeping?" and gave me mentioned my name. He says, "I hear you're taking driving lessons." And I just looked at him in amazement, more or less, "How do you know that?" And he told me that if he got my driving license, would I do him favours? I was amazed, because I was always a type of person who loved cars and things like that, and I always wanted to get my own car, so...
Did he say what sort of favours?
He didn't, but I knew he was getting it. I knew.
Within days, a meeting had been arranged with 2 Special Branch officers who were to become Michael's handlers. It was to be on the edge of a Republican estate.
I had to walk because I had no car, and I walked in to meet him. I get down near the bottom of the road where I was to meet him, and a car stopped in front of me. We went and we talked a bit. They gave me a code name and a telephone number to ring him. They just talked about me, about had any court cases coming up, stuff like that there. Stuff that they can get sorted out, but I hadn't.
So they were offering to square off any crimes you might have committed?
Yeah. At
first, Michael's handlers seemed satisfied with titbits about ordinary crime, for which they paid him small amounts of money. But what they really wanted was information about the IRA, and before long they showed him photographs of people they said were active members.
I knew these people, and I says to myself, there's no way they're anything to do with the IRA. But I was to find out later that they were, and they were right. You see, people imagine that people who are in the IRA, everybody should know them, but it's not like that.
And these people were what? Neighbours, friends?
Some of them were friends from my early teens, and others were just people who lived about the area. So they more or less trained me and showed me photographs, montages of people who they knew were in the IRA, bombers, or people who was carrying out shootings, and they just kept showing me photographs and kept pumping into my head who to watch.
Spying on the neighbours yielded real results. Security force raids on houses Michael identified recovered £1,500 of explosives, 2 rifles, a telescopic sight, ammunition, and bomb-making equipment.
If I got a house hit, most times there was always something found in it. I would never get a house hit if I thought it was just maybe there's something there. I would only get a hit if I said yes. That's very suspicious if I get a hit. And usually I was maybe 6, 7 times out of 10 I'd be right.
While Michael was informing on other people's crimes, his handlers turned a blind eye to his own criminal career of robbery and fraud.
I was caught a few times. I was caught a few times, and I phoned my handlers from a police station, just come up and sorted it, no problem.
What sort of things were you caught doing?
It was something that I could have been in a terrible lot of trouble over. Had I not been working for a special branch, I could have maybe got a big fine, maybe even jailed for a couple of months over it. It was coming to a stage where I was getting useful, and I was only starting off where they wanted me to start, so they couldn't afford for me to go to jail for something stupid.
In August 1989, a £1,000 bomb outside Belfast High Court was one of several attacks aimed at the heart of the legal and security establishment. The Special Branch believed that one of the bombers was a childhood friend of Michael's. His handlers asked him to revive the friendship and increased his regular payments to £100. They also bought him a car which allowed him to drive to safe meeting places. The car also had another purpose. Michael was encouraged to lend it to his friend, and it soon became clear why.
And I was told by 2 of my handlers that they were going to put a tracking device in the car. And I asked them, was it safe for me to drive about work? And they says, it's okay to worry about it. Because even the IRA's debugging equipment wouldn't be defended.
The tracking device showed the Special Branch that Michael's IRA friend was spending a lot of time in the county down town of Cumber, but they didn't know why, so his handlers came up with a plan to lead them to the answer. Michael and his friend shared an interest in cars. Michael's handlers suggested he invite the friend to a weekly car auction near Cumber in the hope that he would take the opportunity to visit the target. The 2 men bought an old Cortina, which they planned to do up and sell for a profit. Then they set out on the return journey to Belfast in convoy.
On the way home with the car, instead of heading back to Belfast, he turned into Cumber, and I followed him. At first I thought maybe he had turned the wrong way, but he kept driving. And when we arrived, I noticed he was looking at this house for maybe 20-30 seconds, and I thought it was unusual.
Michael reported all this to his handlers.
And they went, great, where is it, where's the house? So they went, and they got transport for me to go with them that following night. And we went up, and there was this big house in the corner that I had showed them, and they wrote down the details, and they went and checked it. And they found out that the persons who owned the house were members of the RUC. One was a Divisional Mobile Support Unit, that's DMSU's mobile. in Belfast, and the other worked in a police station in West Belfast too. A girl and a fella.
At their next meeting, Michael's handlers told him the two police officers had been moved. Getting alongside his IRA friend had saved 2 lives. Michael was proving to be a productive agent, so his handlers pushed him to go one step further. They offered him more money to join the IRA.
They told me that I could get £3,000 a month if I was in the right position. £3,000 a month.
What sort of position would you have to have been in to get that?
You would have to be in the IRA knowing about operations that were going to take place. You should be in a position where you should be able to tell them before they take place.
Running the gauntlet of security force checkpoints by moving weapons and explosives around Belfast was the way that Michael proved his mettle to the IRA. Before long, he'd done enough to get himself introduced to the man who ran the IRA's active service units in the city, Brian Gillen.
The man who introduced me to Brian Gillen told him that I had been doing favours for the IRA, and it didn't mind more or less driving explosives and weapons about the areas.
And what was Brian Gillen's response to that, to you?
His response at the start was, he mentioned my name, and he says, I hope you're not working for the branch, which meant the special branch. And I just let out a laugh, because that's all I could do. The guy who was with me, and also him, laughed it off. No, that's a joke.
What sort of man is Mr. Gillen?
He can be a bad man.
What do you mean a bad man?
Well, you hear rumours all around Belfast that I asked people before, how does people like him get to the very top of the IRA? And they've explained to me that anybody who goes to the top of the IRA have done a terrible lot of shootings or bombings in their days. He more or less gave me the impression that if you want to go up the ladders in the IRA, you have to work hard to get up there.
What does working hard in the IRA mean?
It means going out and being successful with operations, going out shooting people, blowing people up, things like that.
Brian Gillen gave Michael the name of another IRA man who could swear him into the organisation. Street mythology in Belfast portrays the IRA as the vanguard of a popular mass revolutionary movement and the true heirs to the Republican tradition.
In the IRA in Belfast, you only need to be able to do one thing. Fire a gun, that's it. Senior IRA men are very, very aware of what they're fighting for, and they're very, very aware of the Irish history. But people who are in at 16 and 17 years of age haven't got a clue.
Name me one Irish patriot.
One? The only person who I would know would be Patrick Pearse.
What did he do?
What did he have?
You haven't got a clue.
He used to run about selling chewing gum balls or something about the streets. He used to be an ice cream man or something. Jesus Christ, I don't know.
The night before Michael joined the IRA, the man who swore him in gave him a solemn warning.
And he says, you could be shot out in an operation for the IRA by the SAS, and you're just dead. He says, so I want you to take this, put this all into your head the night when you're lying in your bed, and think, you don't have to do this. Nobody's pressurizing you to do it, but I'm just making it plain to you. I don't want you coming back or writing big mad letters out or crumbling no jail or on cash to say that, oh, I didn't know this. He's more or less telling you to expect the worst.
The swearing-in ceremony for Michael was held in the bedroom of a West Belfast house.
And he tells you, you mention your name, and he just tells you to follow everything he's saying. And it says, swore to serve the IRA, and all things that you're more or less, I don't know, when you get married, you're taking vows for the IRA, and once you mention all that, you're officially an IRA volunteer.
Did he remind you what the penalty was for talking to the police?
He did. He also mentioned that anybody who is caught even loose talking could be shot.
As the police had intended, Michael was soon working with his IRA friends' bombing team. In August 1990, their target was a policeman in Guildford, County Down. Michael's job was to transport the bomb.
Now, what would have happened if you'd been caught at a roadblock carrying this bomb on the way there?
I wouldn't have been caught.
Why not?
Because I had, my handlers had reassured me that the place would be put out of bounds.
What, the road from Belfast to Guildford?
They have to have details of the checkpoints. So obviously I was told what roads to use.
The IRA's plan was to attach a booby-trap bomb under the policeman's car, which was parked outside his house. They assumed that while they planted the bomb, the policeman and his family would be asleep inside.
The police had arranged for policemen or policewomen, I don't know what sort of thing, to go into the house, and the family had been moved out, and just do the normal procedure. If the policeman went to bed at 11 o'clock, the lights would go off at 11 o'clock, the car would be left in the house, and policemen were in a house across the road, watching the bomb being planted.
At breakfast time this morning, a full-time reserve policeman discovered a suspect package under his car in Guildford.
To disguise Michael's involvement, the story the RUC released to the press was that the policeman had saved his own life by routinely checking under his car.
It's a routine which all members of security forces are encouraged to carry out. Once again, that routine has thwarted the terrorist and saved someone from death or serious injury.
One of the main reasons why I done it for was it was excitement at the very start, and also you were doing things that you knew were going to happen that other people didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, if I had told them that there was a bomb getting planted under a police officer's car, I knew when I was standing there planting that bomb that I was going home, I wasn't going to be arrested, and I was going home and I knew what was going to come on the news that night. You had knowledge that other people didn't have a clue about.
And that gave you a buzz?
It does, gives you a buzz.
2 months later, Michael's unit was again planning to kill a policeman by planting a bomb under his car. After a tip-off from Michael, the police were again waiting for them.
The security forces were on the scene, and they were sitting with video equipment, filming all this. And I think they had it arranged for some kind of an alarm to be installed in the policeman's car. So when one of the IRA men put the bomb under, they could press the button and make the alarm go off. My handlers were laughing at terrible at, because they says you want to see his face when the alarm went off and his head banged off the car and all, and they laughed. More or less, like they couldn't believe. But having said that, like, it just goes to show you that the handlers weren't really interested in arresting people, and it shows that they were keeping their part of the deal, which I had made with them.
The deal being?
No one who I had contact with was to be arrested. Any friends who I was involved with.
In exchange for?
For me passing on everybody information. I made it quite clear to the police that if any of my friends were harmed in any way, I was to take a boat or plane or whatever came first, and I was leaving the country. I think I was one of very, very few informers who had the police actually under my thumb.
Michael may have thought he had a deal that his friends would never be arrested, but in December 1990, it became clear there was no such thing. Following a tip-off to the RUC's confidential telephone from another source about the location of the weapons his two IRA friends were using, the RUC decided to arrest them.
Thank you for calling the confidential telephone. Please speak after the tone.
The two IRA men were arrested after they'd moved the weapons from Michael's house. Far from having his handlers under his thumb, these arrests so close to home showed that the RUC was prepared to take risks with their agents' cover once they'd decided the time had come to break up an IRA unit.
I was very, very nervous, knowing that my friends had been arrested and they wouldn't be back again, knowing that people knew that I hung about with them. It was a wee bit suspicious, me still walking around and then that. So it was a wee bit shaky sometimes.
How did you deflect suspicion from you?
I didn't really deflect. I just tried to act normal and try to be as cute as I could when anybody asked about it. I just hoped that me acting normal would be enough to bluff the IRA.
And was it?
I don't really know. I mean, for all I know, I could have been under suspicion ever since that.
Although Michael had lost his active service unit, he was soon working with another. This unit was proving to be one of the most destructive the IRA ever had. In 1991, they stepped up their campaign to bomb the heart out of Belfast city centre, rebuilt from the devastation of the 70s. It seemed the clock had been turned back 20 years.
How much did the Special Branch know about this new unit that you'd joined?
They knew nothing. Not a thing. They knew the two leaders. They existed. These two were looking after one of the best, both blowy and shooty teams in the whole of Belfast.
Blowy?
I mean, bombing. That's what they call bombing, blowy, right? They were involved in one of the most, I would say, dangerous squads in the whole of Belfast. They were involved every operation that you'd have heard on the television in that period of time that I had moved. They were at least something to do with it, or else had done it.
Unmasked gunmen shot and critically wounded 2 RUC dog handlers in front of dozens of startled shoppers.
They were the type of people who would take any operation on. They would do anything. When I first went into them, and I heard some of the things we were going to do, I looked at them as if to say, is you people real or what? I mean, is there something wrong with you? Is he lacking of brains or something? Because they were talking about, oh, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to walk up the stairs, and I'm going to throw a bomb at these people. Or they were saying, I'm going to walk up behind an armed policeman and just shoot him in the back of the head. And my handlers couldn't believe it when I told them who I was with. They gave me extra money, they promised me the stars of the sky, all things like that.
How much would you say you were earning every year?
A whole lot.
£10,000 a year?
A bit more than that, probably.
20,000?
Maybe.
More than that?
No, wouldn't have been around it. Wouldn't have been much more than 20,000 per year.
25,000?
At around 25,000 per year.
Did you spend it all?
I did.
What did you spend it on?
I call stupid things. I was just running about spending because I had a funny feeling that I would never ever. I knew saving it, but I knew that wasn't gonna be there to spend it.
In the ghettos, money stands out. Michael risked drawing attention to himself by buying new cars, but he was confident his reputation as a criminal would give him an alibi.
So in that sense, people just thought that you were back to your old criminal habits.
They didn't think it was back to my old habits. They thought that I never lost my new ones. I mean, they didn't. People knew. If you asked people back in Ireland, do you know such and such, they would say, no, married. I mean, he's a bit of a, he's an Arthur Daly sort of character, I mean.
But the kidnapping of a policeman on the border had already set in train a series of events which raised the first murmurings among the IRA about Michael's loyalty. Constable Lewis Robinson broke after 7 days of torture and gave the names of several police colleagues to the IRA. They found one officer played golf regularly. Michael was asked to set up his assassination. His handlers suggested that he get the IRA to abort the attack by pretending he'd been stopped at a nearby checkpoint and that the police now had a record of his movements. He was given an RUC form to prove that he had to produce his driving documents.
When you reported back to your IRA boss that you'd been stopped by the police, what was his response?
He went crazy. He started shouting. What the F? He says, what's happening to me? He says, every time you go and do something, he says, something's going wrong. How did you drive into a checkpoint? Every time something like this happens, it's put on a wee report, not officially, but people keep that in their head to say, oh, he was watching this policeman, and the policeman started to disappear, and he was involved in Guildford, and the bomb was found on the car. He was involved in Carryduff, and the bomb was found on that car.
And reminders of his fate, if the IRA ever made the connections, were being reported with chilling regularity.
This morning, the security forces moved in to remove the body from the Dundalk Road. The IRA said Patrick Flood had been one of its members who'd passed information about fellow terrorists to the security forces.
How often did you used to think about the possibility that you might get shot?
Every time I heard that an informer had been shot. But people tell you that people give you the impression, they always go, oh, it won't happen to me. But I never thought like it.
One special branch handler, whom Michael had come to regard as a friend, did not disguise the risks that he was running.
We called each other Felix. I don't know why, but we called each other Felix. He would come to me sometimes and he would say, if they ever get you, he says, you know what's going to happen to you? I says, I know. And he was straight and he says, if they ever get you, you realise what you're doing. You know you're never going to come out alive, unless you're very good. I liked him for that. Even though he was telling me that I was going to die one day if I was caught, I liked him for it because he was honest.
But for all this candour, Michael's handlers expected results. Every time he met them, which was now daily, sometimes in the back of a van, the odds on his survival were shortening. Michael's tip-offs were saving lives. But the more his handlers paid him, the more they pushed him. And the more they pushed him, the more he risked his cover being blown. And stopping was simply not an option.
If I had to stop running about with that crowd and everything had started going right, then obviously people was going, how's this happening? He just left us and everything's going brilliant. Go and get him back here and find out what's happening. Or if I was still staying there, I had a bit of a chance. Whereas if I had left, I had no chance.
This sense of feeling trapped induced acute anxiety.
When I was walking home, there was Andrews, alleyways, and every couple of feet there was like a blind corner. I used to always say to myself, this is a real Republican area. And if this is back me, this is where they'll get me. And I used to always be very, very scared. It was just times like that, mostly at night times, when you got a bit nervous.
Michael was now so paranoid the IRA would add up all his failures, he became desperate to prove he could be a success. The opportunity arose in East Belfast in June 1991. It meant getting involved in murder. Michael's handlers had warned him that if ever he participated in a killing, he risked a life sentence. But now he felt he had no choice. He says there was no time to tip off his handlers.
There was no way that I could have rang anybody because I had an IRA man on the cover me the whole way. He didn't get out until I was parked in the car park, right at about 20 yards from the front door where the shooting was going to take place. And for me to run around the corner and phone my handlers, I would never be able to do it in time. But at the same time, having said that, it came into my head saying to myself, like, if this goes ahead with, maybe there's a chance, if there's any suspicion on me, it may clean it up a wee bit. It's a bad thing to say, but at the end of the day, you know what I mean? I had saved a terrible lot of lives. And if I thought this here could have made me look as if I was on their side, so be it.
The IRA's target was a 21-year-old paratrooper, Tony Harrison, who'd returned to Belfast on leave to make plans for his wedding to a local girl. On the way there, Michael stopped in a car park to collect a second gunman. Then he drove them to the soldier's house.
I parked there, and they walked up the street, and they told me, if you hear any shots, drive up the street, stop the car, let us in, and we'll drive away. The guys who went into the house were in the house for a good, Jesus, 30 seconds, 40 seconds. 40 seconds is a type of long time when you're sitting in a getaway car, knowing something's going to get you dead. Very nerve-wracking. 2 seconds, the police could drive around a corner and open up. They shot him 5 times, I heard it. Bang, 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 bang. 5 times. And I more or less says to myself, Jesus Christ. No, I mean, I drove up a street and the two of them just walked out of the house, calm. I couldn't believe it. Walked out, opened the door into the car. And at this stage, I was driving the car and I remember the wheels was skidding. The more I put my foot down, the more the wheels were skidding. But anyway, I got away and I dropped the two guys off.
The shooting, which took place in front of Private Harrison's girlfriend, has shocked local people. The MP for the area said the killing stood out for its sheer barbarity and undiluted evil.
To have killed this young man in the manner in which he was killed and in front of his fiancée.
When I get back and the news was coming on and I seen it, I just say it right away. There was no cutting corners, there was no a man is seriously injured. It was a man's dead, that was it, just clean cut, the man's dead.
Indicates a depth of depravity that these characters...
The people who did shoot him just run about like heroes for the next few days. Everybody thought it was great because they shot a soldier.
It emphasises and underlines more than any words of any politician ever could. The need.
He says, I'm going to go to jail for this. Because obviously, like, I'm involved in an IRA operation. Even though I was working for the police, I can still be prosecuted for it.
By not forewarning his handlers, Michael had broken the cardinal rule. They didn't know it then, but the killing of Private Harrison marked the point at which they'd lost control of their agent. 3 weeks later, Michael again failed to tip off his handlers, this time about a deadly ambush.
Police have described this morning's explosion at Dunmerry near Lisburn as a dastardly attack without regard for human life. 2 police officers who'd been lured to the scene have been treated for shock.
A fortnight later, Michael was again prepared to participate in murder. This time, his IRA unit planned to massacre paratroopers at a bar in the seaside town of Bangor. A woman member of the IRA brought the weapons there by train. Michael drove the gunman in a hijacked car. He had ample opportunity to inform his handlers, but he quite deliberately chose not to.
But why hadn't you told your handlers about this?
The reason I didn't tell them for was because, as I say, I tell you, it was coming to a stage where I was getting... People weren't talking to me, people weren't bothering with me, and I get very, very paranoid that people definitely suspected me as being an informant, even though I was involved in the operation.
Michael met the IRA woman at Bangor railway station. She carried 2 assault rifles and 150 rounds of ammunition in a holdall. These were to be used to machine gun the soldiers. She also carried a bomb to blow up the bar to prevent the emergency services from getting access to the wounded.
The instruction was that if they go into the bar and any of the girls, females, try to act heroes and stand in front of the British Army guys, to shoot them. Just shoot them, that was it.
The plan was to attack the bar when it was packed to capacity with soldiers on a Saturday night. Michael drove the gunmen and the bomb to the scene. But while the IRA waited for the bar to fill up with soldiers, Michael and his entire unit were spotted by his handlers. The Special Branch were acting on information from another source. They now saw for themselves that they'd lost their agent. The RUC flooded the area. The attack was aborted and the IRA melted into the crowd. The next day, Michael's handlers demanded an urgent meeting.
I get into the back of the van, and when I get in, I was amazed to see this inspector, because it was very rare to see him coming out to see me. The only time he would come out if there was something really hot going on, and he came out and he says, the first things he says to me was, he says, right, you better tell me what you're up to. I says, tell, what do you mean what I'm up to? I'm up to nothing. He says, who are you trying to kid? And they end up taking me to a place where we go. It's a safe place with a special branch to take people. He told me that a helicopter had been watching every movement was made on the Bangor operation. He even says that he had proof that we were going to carry out an operation and I wasn't going to tell my handlers. And he says that I could have been very easily shot dead or arrested and there was nothing that they could have done. So I says, it's getting out of order. I said, no, I'm not telling you nothing more.
But in the end, you did tell them
what
was going on Bangor. Why?
I told them because it came to a stage they kept going on about it that much, and it was that important to tell them that I just get fed up listening to them. I just get fed up. And they told me that they were going to give me so much money if I had told him the full story of what was happening. So I agreed this, and we worked out a deal that I was to tell them what was happening, and they guaranteed me that nobody would be arrested.
How much did they say they'd pay you?
They told me they would get £20,000, and I got £1,000 off them up front.
While Michael's fellow IRA men planned the second attack on Bangor, he was entrusted with hiding the guns and the bomb. His special branch handlers told him to bring them to Castlereagh RUC station in the early hours of the morning. For the moment, their agent was back on side.
I arranged for the handlers to meet me. They escorted me to Castlereagh, car in front, me in the middle, car behind. I brought the weapons to Castlereagh. They took over from there.
In Castlereagh, a technician took Polaroid snaps of the weapons and the bomb before returning them to Michael a few hours later.
He knew that by taking a photograph before and after, he knows that he's going to get it back to the standards in which he got it.
Do you know what he was doing with them?
I think that he was doctoring them in some way.
Doctoring them?
Yeah. More or less putting bugs or bugging equipment to them.
In the weapons?
Yeah.
What was he doing with the bomb? Do you know that?
I was told by my handlers that they had stuff, they inject the bomb with red Sentex, and it more or less like freezes it all or something. It's like a chemical. And the detonator goes off, but the explosive doesn't blow up.
Michael returned the weapons to their hiding place. A few days later, they were removed for the IRA's second attack. This time, he was not included, but the police were waiting. A car driving into Bangor was stopped and 2 people were arrested. Michael was now certain he'd been rumbled.
I had been at a friend's house, and a guy who I know in the IRA came to me. He found out where I was, and he told me that he had heard that 2 people had been arrested. And he had just died because he was looking at me straight in the eyes when he was saying it. And I couldn't look at him straight in the eyes because I knew that, Jesus, I knew that something to do with it.
A few days later, Michael was invited to the Sinn Féin Centre at Connolly House. A man called Padraig Wilson, in charge of internal IRA security, had asked to see him.
But why didn't you say to your handlers, look, I want to call it a day, I've done some good work, get me across to another country, give me a new identity?
Yeah, it's not as easy as that. The special branch have to be, again, like the IRA, really, really positive that you are in danger before they'll even attempt to move you.
Otherwise they won't let go.
They won't move you. They won't let go. Why should they move somebody who's doing as much work as I was? And maybe people are on the boat going, oh, where did he go? Where did he disappear for? And maybe them thinking that I could have got a couple of more months or even years service.
Michael's handlers told him to go to Connolly House and reassured him they'd follow him every step of the way.
And when I was sitting there, a big heavy guy came in. He's in the IRA, you know him, you call him Chico. And he came in and he asked me, was I such and such? I says, I was. He says, are you here to see Padraig? I says, yeah, I am. He says, look, I'll tell you what it is. He sent us down and he told us to tell you that he can't make it. But he says, if you want to go on home and get back up on our day, he'll see. And I says to myself, this isn't serious, this. So I said, I'll tell you what. He says, I'd rather go up and see him.
Lulled into believing there was no danger, Michael agreed to drive up to Twinbrook with Chico to find Padraig Wilson. No sooner had he got into the car when he realized he'd made a terrible mistake.
As they pulled out onto the main road, I noticed they were trying to get out quick, and he broke a red light in case anybody was following him. I started getting a wee bit worried there, because I says if I was following somebody and they broke a red light and they get a good distance in front, it would be very hard to find out where they went. I knew on the road up to Twinbrook it was either die or go away. I knew that my Belfast life had been finished. Why I didn't make a run for it, it was because there's 2 of these guys, and for me to get out of a car and run, with me having no backup, I'm on my own. I mean, one of these guys is a big guy. I could handle the small one, no 2 ways about it. But the big guy, for me to try and fight with 2 guys, I'm fighting a losing battle. And for me to do that, I'm more or less telling them what I am, even before I've been interrogated.
When Michael arrived at the flat, there was no sign of Padraig Wilson. But another IRA man, Jim McCarthy, was there waiting for him.
Jim McCarthy walked in and he says, look, I'll tell you what it is. Provisional IRA, you're under arrest. So I just look around in amazement, like, fuck, I'm under arrest. You know what I mean? And he says to me, empty your pockets. Empty my pockets. I had £500 in cash which I took out of my pockets.
Where did they tell you to sit? Or
They didn't. They told me to lie down on the settee, and I lay down. As soon as I put my knees on the settee, I had a pair of trainers on, and they pulled them off. And McCarthy was panicking a terrible lot, pulling my laces out. And this other big guy, Chico, I'll never forget it, says, I mean, we're nervous in a stout. Don't try anything, don't try anything. Don't try to do anything. We'll have a short in the kitchen.
a what?
A short, a pistol. I remember I was lying and hours had passed and was listening to a radio station, downtown radio, and it was on very low. And because everything was that quiet, these two guys were sitting quiet reading. I could hear everything. I could hear kids in the background. Things that you never ever take for granted. You hear things in the background like kids, and you can hear vans and cars away in the distance. And I was just lying there. The time was just flying and the time was flying. It was unbelievable. I was sitting going like, Jesus, I would love to see my girlfriend again, or my kids, or my mother. And if this here works out the way the IRA want it, she'll not see me again. She'll see me again, but it'll not be alive. So I was more or less sitting saying to myself, this is unbelievable. The last time I seen people will be the last time, you know what I mean? I knew for a fact that I wasn't coming there alive if I had stayed there. I was saying to myself, waking up, this is a nightmare. Felix told me, if we know where you are, we'll get you. He says, we'll make sure we get you. He says, but if we don't know where you are, he says, my advice is to you is try and keep him as long as you can. He says, because every minute you keep him, every minute we're closer to him. I heard a British Army guy standing outside the house shouting, shut up, because there had been a dog barking at him. And I looked out at the window and there were two helicopters hovering above the flats. And I imagined they could see into me, because I could see them. And I was just praying that they knew where I was.
What was going through your mind when you heard the sound of the helicopters fading?
I got the impression that they thought that I was in another area, and maybe they thought they were in the wrong area looking for me. More or less, I got the impression that they'd lost me altogether. So I was just more or less saying to myself, it's up to me now.
By now, several hours had passed, and Michael was convinced his handlers would never find him. He was allowed to go to the bathroom, and what he saw there confirmed his worst fears.
I knew that the bath wasn't filled up because somebody was getting the bath, because it would have been cold by the time they got in it. And I knew that somebody hadn't left the water in the bath, because the water was crystal clear. And I knew for a fact that it was to torture me.
Did you think you could cope with that?
No way. No way. The bath, and me thinking about never seeing my kids again, and my mother, and my sister and brothers, made me more determined to want to make my own escape. I said to myself, I could jump out here. I could die, but I want to die. I could jump out here. I could be end up very seriously injured, but I want to survive. And I just said to myself, go for it. And I remember the glass breaking in slow motion, and my lights just went out like that. Next thing I remember, a girl had me in her arms, going, "You be alright, son, the ambulance is coming, the ambulance is coming." And this is the only thing I can remember until I got into the hospital.
Michael never did find out if his handlers had lost his trail, or whether they were preparing to rescue him. After hospital treatment, he recovered in the safety of an army barracks. There, he went through one final and extensive debriefing.
They told me that they want everything that I hadn't told them about, more or less wiped the slate clean. They weren't exactly expecting me to say that I was involved in driving a getaway car for a murder.
So what did they actually say to you when you told them you'd been involved in murder?
One of them told me, I didn't hear, forget about it. He says, Jesus, don't tell, I don't want to hear.
Michael's handlers wanted him to put the murder and Belfast behind him. They were opening a new chapter in his life. A new house in another country awaited him. In all, the Special Branch have spent about £150,000 resettling and paying Michael. But he can never return home to his family, and there is always the IRA.
There's a saying, isn't there? You can run, but you can't hide.
There is. But as I say, I know there's a saying, and I've always used that saying, but the way I look at it is, I can run, and I'm going to try my best to hide. But if I ever get a mutter, that means a word, that the IRA are coming to get me, and I know about it before they come, I'll make sure there's a surprise waiting for them. But if they get me before I find out, good luck to them. That's all I can say.